Hi everyone, I'm Jenna Callahan from the Powassan Area Family Health Team, and this is the Mindfulness series. This video is going to have a specific focus on eating, and it's going to give some basic information on the different issues associated with eating and how mindfulness can be a beneficial practice for those who have trouble in response to their own eating and are looking for a little bit of help. So let's get right into it. So obviously, just some very basic facts. We all require food intake as part of sustaining our bodies, our health, and our wellness. And we all have cues that tells us when to eat and what to eat. We know those cues is that stomach gurgling or the cravings that are okay, we need some sustenance. However, we are becoming increasingly distracted with our eating. So as time goes on, the less we're all sitting down to eat at every meal and focusing on what we're putting into our bodies. Now we see a lot more people being distracted by their cell phones or by watching television when they eat or being or eating on the go. So picking up something on the way to work or on the way to another hobby. So we are seeing increased distraction with eating. And when we have distracted eating, we don't necessarily register those cues that I was talking about just now. We're not understanding when we're full. We're not listening to our bodies saying, eat this, because maybe you're lacking in that nutrient. And along with this as well, we also have increasing maladaptive eating habits. So here's a list of examples of different maladaptive eating practices. The first one is overeating. And overeating is those who are eating in excess. So this is eating to the point of physical discomfort, binging habits, eating a lot of convenience foods. So that would be a lot of fast food, a lot of junk food, things that come in large quantities that we don't necessarily need. And then finally, mindless eating. So really not paying attention. That would be, for example, me sitting on the couch eating an entire bag of chips before even realizing that I did because I'm just focused on something else, right? We also have undereating. So undereating would be not meeting our caloric intake of the day or not meeting our nutritional needs. And we do see that mindfulness-based practices are being used by professionals in addressing restrictive dieting practices such as anorexia nervosa. So those disordered eating habits as well. Another example of maladaptive eating is emotional eating. So this is when a person uses eating to soothe or to ignore negative feelings. So really, it could also be used as rewards as well, right? I did something that was really hard, so now I'm going to go and get myself a treat for myself. So really, it's not hunger based, it's not nutritional based. It's I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling angry, so I'm going to eat in response to that, as opposed to listening to my hunger cues. Kind of along with this is stress eating. So again, getting into that very mindless practice of experiencing our stress to the point that we're not paying attention to our hunger cues. We're not focusing on what's going in our bodies. It's making us feel better. Food is serving a purpose that is not to keep ourselves healthy and well based on the needs of our bodies. It's more related to our brains. And finally, people use food for coping. I think everybody has kind of that comfort food that just kind of brings them back to simpler times. So really, emotional stress and coping forms of eating, they're really all addressing similar things. They're addressing mental health concerns, and it's using food as a way to soothe ourselves and to help ourselves through hard times. And I think that it's really important to bring awareness that we all do have our own relationships with food and with our own bodies. Some people are very confident in their relationship with food and their bodies, whereas others aren't for different reasons, right? We all have different genetics, allergies, metabolisms, preferences, priorities, and that all interacts with our relationship with food and our relationship with eating. What works for one person may not be what works for another person. And that's where we run into issues with dieting and um, people seeing results, maybe results that they don't want to see, or maybe not understanding why they're not achieving the results that maybe a friend or even a celebrity has attained before as well. So I just really wanted to bring particular focus to that because I know that eating is a particularly sensitive topic for some people for whichever reason. And I really do want to acknowledge that it's a very individual experience. And us attaining health, whatever that looks like for us, is different per person. And we do all have very different bodies. So I think it's important to address as well that whether you're thin or whether you may be higher on the BMI scale, so clinically overweight, maybe that doesn't mean that you're unhealthy. It really does become something deeper than that. Being naturally thin could be a sign of restrictive eating, whereas being overweight could be a sign that it may just be your genetics. Maybe you carry weight differently than another person. So this kind of comparison towards other people isn't really a fair concept, and it's one that needs to be challenged on a deeper level. Mindfulness, in and of itself, is defined as being present in the moment, being aware of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and the environment around us, and paired with the non judgment or acceptance as everything as it is. So, the practice of mindfulness is to essentially stabilize the mind, decrease excessive overthinking, and to become absorbed in just concentrating on the present. The goal of mindfulness is to bring an awareness of our thoughts and our feelings, which can lead us to having um, better behavior and being more in control of our thinking in general. So, when it comes to eating, mindfulness is actually very interesting in that it's not a traditional kind of meditative experience where we're sitting there trying to focus on nothing and trying to slow our brains. It's practicing um, engagement with food, making our food intake more of an experience than just another mindless habit and another part of our routine. And really, practicing mindfulness while we eat can bring a whole new level of enjoyment to our food and allow us to understand our body cues a lot better. And it can also help us address our maladaptive eating practices. So it's much harder to overeat when we're recognizing when our hunger cues are there in an enjoyable way. So, really, the goal with practicing mindful eating is to put particular focus on what we're consuming. So, the flavors, temperature, and it can really enhance our eating experience in general. And it can help us address our maladaptive eating practices. It's really hard to overeat when we are very aware of the sensation of fullness in our bodies. Another goal of mindful eating is to help us positively change our relationship with food and with our bodies. And to know that food is neither good nor bad. Food is just food. If you want a bag of chips, if you want an apple, if you want a bunch of spinach, whatever it is that you want, there's no moral code that comes to eating. Our body has an amazing way of telling us what it needs. So when we're thirsty, our body tells us that we're thirsty. We just sometimes have to pay a little bit closer attention and also give our body a bit of a reset as well, which can be difficult. If we're used to being very restricted or overindulging, as we'll say, then it can be really hard in finding our equilibrium because it may be different for us. And I think a really interesting concept of mindful eating is that there's no goal associated. It's just eating. This may actually be like a very um, foreign concept to people to not have a goal of eating. Some of us are, the reason why we drift towards the apple or the bunch of spinach is because it'll help us achieve a weight goal or a fitness goal. But really, the practice of mindful eating is just enjoying food, enjoying flavor, and getting back to the simplicity that eating can be. In, Instead of viewing food as either a reward or a punishment or feeding into diet culture, which can be so toxic, um, it really is just bringing it back to the very basics and knowing that we're allowed to enjoy food. We're allowed to have it just be this simple. So, here are some of the mindful eating practices that we're this is what we're trying to achieve within this state. This is the state of concentration. So we're eating without distraction. So taking that time out of our day instead of jumping around to, I just want to relax in front of the TV. I just want to talk with my family. Really just enjoying that focus. And this doesn't have to be all the time. Of course, I think it's important to engage with family around food. That is how cultures have been made around a kitchen table. So these are just, it's not for every day, but it's helping us gain this practice, right? So it's more natural. Mindful eating includes listening to our body cues, our hunger cues, our fullness cues, our thirst cues as well count in there as well. And engaging our senses when we eat. So looking at this beautiful bowl of some sort of, I don't know, grainy salad thing. Uh, what does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like when we put it in our mouths? What flavors are we experiencing? And just really simply engaging our senses. And this is almost a motivating thing to have food be beautiful and have it taste really good. So this can also ramp up our motivation to cook as well and try new things. Another part of mindful eating is learning how to cope with guilt and anxiety about food. How do we, how can we look at some of the things we eat and be okay with it and just leave it there? Not only this, but also how do we cope with the emotions and the stress that can lead us to emotional eating and coping using food? So it really is this kind of um, full experience of trying to relearn habits and with the goal of achieving health and wellness. So part of this is going to be definitely related to non-judgment and trying to have a non-judgmental view of ourselves um, when we eat and to take the guilt and anxiety out of that as well. So I definitely recommend trying that out. I think mindful eating is actually one of my favorite forms of mindfulness because there really is, with this sense of focus in the present that we're bringing, it really does bring flavors forward, and food is one of my favorite things. So I really encourage you guys to try it out. And actually, I do have a guided meditation for mindful eating. For that practice, try something. Usually, we use a raisin just because it's not something that you put in your mouth and immediately it dissolves. Of course, you can find other things that you can kind of sit with as well. But try out that meditation. It's about 10 minutes. So that's why it's just one raisin. It's not a whole meal or anything by any means. But give it a try. See how it makes you feel. See if it feels natural and see if that's something that you can incorporate into your day to day. Even just taking a couple minutes to really sit with the food that we want to enjoy. As always, here are some resources that I always have available at the end of these videos. The Insight Timer is a free app and they do have mindful eating meditations that are guided as well. We have the Headspace and the Calm apps, which you do have to pay for, but if it is something that you want to engage in, I highly recommend. You can also just YouTube an eating meditation. There are tons on there, and pick which one kind of works for you and your time frame. In general, Headspace is now on Netflix, and that can just kind of ramp up the beginning stages of mindfulness for a learner. It's tough to kind of empty our heads out sometimes. And then here are some books that I recommend: Mindful Eating, Eat to Love, and The Mind Gut Connection. So, all of those books are mindfulness based to help us change our relationship with food and to find more enjoyment in eating in general. So, I hope you found this helpful. Give mindful eating a shot, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. And thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day.